Chapter 2146. Such a young girl, at an age where she should be innocent and romantic, bore too much pain that shouldn't belong to her. Her crying came too suddenly, and even the parents who were originally aggressive were stunned. Then Gu Xingyin began to talk while crying. September 30th last year was the day I was beaten for the first time. At that time, it was Zhang Qin and He Kai. The two of them were in a bad mood after quarreling, so they took me to the corner of the female toilet and slapped me 4 times. The second time was after the National Day holiday in October. Zhang Qin, Dudua, and Lu Yan dragged me into the classroom and said that I was a bitch who complained to the teacher. At that time, the students in the class all saw it. She looked at the students who had evasive expressions and said, "Because the teacher didn't care, you became more and more excessive. You beat me, locked me in an empty room for a few days, and tore my books and workbooks. The students in the class all know about these things." As she spoke, her voice gradually lowered. When Grandma was still alive, she told me to forget those unhappy things and just remember the happy things. Her eyes were a little blank as she muttered, "But after Grandma died, how could I live a happy life?" The others subconsciously glanced at the students she was talking about. After all, they were teenagers. They couldn't be as thick-skinned as Lu Hong to distort the truth. Being looked at by everyone like this, the few of them were a little timid. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. It was already quite obvious. "I'll beat you to death, you bastard." Suddenly, a loud roar came from the office. Everyone only saw He Kai's tall and strong father directly kick his knee, causing him to kneel down. Then, without saying anything, he pulled out his belt and whipped He Kai. "Your father sent you to school to bully your classmates? Bastard, you even bullied a female classmate? Hit a woman? Your father feels ashamed for you." He was very strong, and his outburst came suddenly. Everyone didn't react until they heard He Kai cry out twice. The first reaction of the surrounding parents was to protect their children and take 2 steps back. The older policeman was the first to react and quickly went up to pull him back. "You can't educate your child like this." He stepped forward and pulled her back. He Kai's father was still scolding. "Officer, don't stop me. I have to beat him up today and teach him a lesson." He was dragged to the other side and saw Gu Xingyin standing there. When he glared at her, Gu Xingyin was so scared that she quickly shrank back. Perhaps He Kai's father knew that he looked a little scary, so he forced himself to smile and said to Gu Xingyin, "Don't be afraid, classmate. I apologize to you on behalf of my son, He Kai. It's my uncle's fault for not teaching his son well. I'll get that little brat to apologize to you personally later." Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. He Kai was usually sloppy in school. She didn't expect him to be so timid when he saw his father. However, her impression of her father had improved by quite a bit. She didn't say anything and just stood there quietly. However, He Kai's father's behavior didn't mean that the other parents were happy. Zhang Qin's mother stood out and looked at Gu Xingyin with disdain. "Who knows if this girl is telling the truth? I heard that she doesn't have parents, right? It's easy for a child like her to have problems. She can lock her classmates in an abandoned classroom today. What if she does something even worse tomorrow?" Seeing that everyone was looking at her, she said with conviction, "I don't care what happened in the past. My daughter was bullied yesterday. I have to get justice for her." Update. I wish all the readers a happy holiday. Gao Lingji, who was 3.5 years old today, expressed that she didn't receive sweets and blessings and was very unhappy. Chapter 2147. The young policeman opened his mouth. He felt extremely angry in his heart, but he couldn't say anything for a while. It was probably because he had never seen such a shameless person before. He said, "Madam, your daughter and other students have been bullying other students for a long time. They were wrong first. Do you mean that your daughter can bully others, but others can't touch your daughter? What kind of bandit logic was this?" The woman looked arrogant. "Who said that my daughter bullied her? Did my daughter admit it herself? Did any of you see it? This little b** starred said it herself. Who can believe her words?" She was very sure in her heart. Anyway, as long as she didn't admit it, who could prove that what Zhou Qi said was true? She secretly pinched her daughter, who was in a daze. Zhang Qin felt the pain and immediately reacted. She said loudly, "Yes. Zhou Qi framed me. I didn't hit her or bully her. Who knows how she got the injury on her body? Anyway, it has nothing to do with me." Gu Xingyin looked at her in surprise. Sure enough, the kind of family raised the kind of child. Zhang Qin being like this was really completely raised astray. However, her mother looked proud. "Did you hear that? Our Qin didn't bully others. On the contrary, this little b** starred locked my daughter in an abandoned house last night. I'm going to sue her. This is illegal. I want her to go to jail." Zhang Qin stood beside her mother and glanced at Gu Xingyin proudly. Lu Hong, the head teacher who had been sitting on the side, also quickly said, "Yes. Zhou Qi is talking nonsense. Zhang Qin and other students are all well-behaved and studious students. How could they bully their classmates? I think it's obvious that Zhou Qi was beaten outside. In order to blackmail her classmates, she said such words." The reporter had been watching this scene silently from the back. At this moment, when he heard the head teacher say such shameless words, he couldn't tolerate it anymore. He was about to stand up and refute on the spot, but someone was one step faster than him. It was Zhou Qi. Her small figure stood among several adults who were much taller than her. At this moment, she was no longer timid and uneasy. Instead, she was so calm that it was frightening. It was as if he had completely given up on this world. Her clear eyes stared at Lu Hong without blinking. The deathly stillness in her eyes made Lu Hong shiver uncontrollably. Gu Xingyin said slowly, "Teacher Lu, God is watching what people do. What kind of life have I been living in the past year? Who caused all these scars on my body? Others might not know, but you should know better than anyone." Lu Hong's heart skipped a beat. She forced herself to keep a straight face as she reprimanded, "Student Zhou Qi, you should know your mistake when you've done something wrong. Do you think that you can get away with just making up a few excuses? Let me tell you, you are delusional." Gu Xingyin interrupted her. "Did you do something wrong?" She was too lazy to look at that woman's ugly face. She just pointed at herself and then at her 4 classmates. "Which one of you thinks that with my small body, I can knock down the 4 of them and lock them in the abandoned teaching building?" Gu Xingyin sneered. "If I had this ability, would I have been bullied so badly for more than a year?" Chapter 2148. When she said this, everyone fell silent. In fact, the contrast was quite obvious. The 2 policemen had thought the same thing before. Zhou Qi was just a weak little girl. How could she be so powerful? Taking a step back, if she was really so powerful, would she be bullied like this? No matter how they looked at it, it was just those students who were frightened and then talking nonsense. Zhang Qin screamed, "Zhou Qi, don't pretend to be weak. What did you look like when you hit me yesterday? My body still hurts when you touch me. How dare you not admit it?" Everyone looked at her lively appearance and rosy cheeks. "Girl, can you pay a little attention to your image when you speak or dress up a little? No one will believe you even if you spout nonsense." Realizing that others were looking at her with scrutiny and disbelief, Zhang Qin suddenly came back to her senses. In fact, if she had a brain at this moment, she would think carefully about how to turn the situation around to her advantage in such a disadvantageous situation. However, perhaps Zhang Qin was used to being superior in front of Zhou Qi. When she faced Zhou Qi, she almost never treated her like a normal classmate. Well, in her eyes, Zhou Qi was usually just a trash can to vent negative emotions. How could she treat a trash can seriously? Therefore, when she found out that this trash can had one day bitten her back and put her in a disadvantageous position, Zhang Qin's first reaction was irrational. She rushed up and habitually reached out to greet Gu Xingyin's face. "Who asked you to pretend? Zhou Qi, tell me the truth. Did you lock us up yesterday? Do you think you can erase the truth if you don't admit it? I'll beat you to death, you little bastard." Her action was so sudden that even the policeman standing next to Gu Xingyin didn't react. By the time he reacted, Zhang Qin and Zhou Qi were already entangled together. The police separated the 2 without hesitation. At this time, even the parents who wanted to cause trouble looked at Zhang Qin with a strange expression. Even they felt a little embarrassed on their faces. From Zhang Qin's reaction, it was obvious who was the bully and who was the victim. If it wasn't a long-term habit, how could Zhang Qin greet people so skillfully? Who would believe that Zhou Qi alone would be able to defeat Zhang Qin, who had such a strong fighting ability, and 3 other students? The police officer said. It's obvious that the 4 students were locked up in the abandoned school building. It should be someone else's doing. He looked at Zhang Qin and the other 3 and asked again. Now that the police are here, you can tell the truth. Who locked you in the teaching building? Zhang Qin said almost without hesitation. I said it's that little bastard Zhou Qi. Don't be fooled by her. The policeman frowned and looked at the others. The other 2 girls were smarter than Zhang Qin. At this moment, they seemed to have realized that things had gone beyond their expectations. Minnie lowered his head and whispered, I don't know either. I didn't see clearly. As soon as she said this, Zhang Qin looked at her in disbelief. Duo, what are you saying? It's obviously Zhou Qi. Minnie looked up and said softly, Zhang Qin, let's not bully him anymore. Chapter 2149. Zhang Qin looked at Duoduo's gentle face. For some reason, she felt a chill in her heart. She turned to look at Lu Yan. Lu Yan looked at Duo and said hesitantly, I was scared, so I said Zhou Qi's name casually. When He Kai heard what they said, he opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he met his father's cold eyes. He shrank his neck and said slowly, I don't know who hit me. If his father knew that he was beaten up so badly by a girl, he would be even angrier. At this point, the matter was basically settled. Zhang Qin and the other students bullied Zhou Qi all year round. This time, they were locked up in the abandoned teaching building by unknown people. After they were found, they casually said Zhou Qi's name to take the blame. This matter had nothing to do with Zhou Qi at all. When Zhang Qin's mother heard this, she was very unhappy. But since it was like this, she had nothing to say. She could only say with a cold face, since this is a misunderstanding, I'll take my Qin home first. This child was scared last night, and kept saying that her body hurt. I have to take her to the hospital for a good checkup. After saying that, she wanted to leave with Zhang Qin. It was the young policeman who shouted from behind, Wait a minute. He walked forward and said with a serious face, The results of this matter are not out yet. We naturally have to continue the investigation. This kind of behavior that dared to kidnap and humiliate students in school was actually quite dangerous. Of course, they had to deal with it seriously. Moreover, there was another problem. In addition, regarding Zhou Qi being bullied in school all year round, the school and her parents should give an answer. The young policeman was really distressed. His sister, that delicate little girl, would scream for a long time even if her calf knocked on the table. But the girl in front of him, who was covered in bruises, did not show any expression at all. Did she not feel pain? Of course not. She was used to it. For this kind of thing, he felt that as a policeman, whether it was out of duty or morality, he could not stand by and do nothing. He could imagine that if this matter was ignored, this girl called Zhou Qi would probably have a more miserable life in the future. Answer? Zhang Qin's mother raised her eyelids and sneered. What a joke. This little bastard said that my Qin hit her. Where's the evidence? How could the police believe her without any evidence? Then our Qin will say that this little bastard hit her. She kept calling him a little bastard, which made the young policeman frown. Madam, the other party is just a child. Aren't you being too hurtful with your words? The young policeman had been working for the past few years, and his temper had improved a lot. Otherwise, according to his temper a few years ago, he really wouldn't mind using some means to teach this woman a lesson. It was true that they should respect women and those who were older than them. However, the prerequisite was that the other party was worthy of respect. Zhang Qin's mother raised her eyebrows. What did I say wrong? Isn't this Zhou Qi just a little bastard without parents? The young policeman clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked. Instead, it was Gu Xingyin who stepped forward and grabbed his hand. Big brother, don't be angry, she said softly. Then he looked at the mother and daughter and said calmly, Although I didn't have the upbringing of my parents, my grandmother taught me the etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame since I was young. I always think that this is the most precious treasure in my life. She smiled slightly. Obviously, although Zhang Qin's parents are still around, she didn't learn what she should have learned. Chapter 2150. Well done. Reporter Wang Lu looked at Gu Xingyin with a smile in his eyes. Not only him, but everyone looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. They didn't expect that Zhou Qi, who looked weak and timid, would say such sharp words. Zhang Qin's mother was stunned for a moment before she realized that this girl was scolding her for being uncultured, and her daughter for being uneducated. She subconsciously raised her hand again. Gu Xingyin said again, "People like you, except for arrogance and money to cover up your lack of quality, what else do you have?" She retreated to the side of the policeman. "I want to call the police, big brother." She looked at the young policeman. "I want to sue Zhang Qin, Lu Yan, Su Duo, and He Kai in the class for beating and insulting me for a long time, which affected my daily life and physical and mental health." She continued to look at the vice principal and the head teacher in the office. "I want to sue my head teacher, Teacher Lu, for accepting bribes from parents and being indifferent to students being beaten and insulted. It's against the teacher's ethics. I also want to sue Vice Principal Song for having a close relationship with the parents of rich families in the school in private, accepting a lot of bribes and," she glanced at Lu Hong, whose face was ugly, and the corners of her mouth raised in an unexpected smile, "cheating in marriage and having an improper relationship with Teacher Lu." "What nonsense are you talking about?" The head teacher, Lu Hong, was the first to react. She pointed at Gu Xingyin angrily. "I knew that you were a bad teacher. I thought you were just a little stupid, but I didn't expect your character to be so bad. You dare to frame teachers and elders." Gu Xingyin didn't care. "Teacher, you know best whether it's nonsense or not." Her voice was very clear. "I'm not stupid. I've been holding it in before because I wanted to finish school safely. But now I suddenly understand that it's useless to hold it in like this. Maybe one day I'll go missing or die, and no one will find out. At worst, I won't go to school in number 1 middle school. Anyway, I haven't learned anything this year. If it goes on like this, I don't know if I can survive these 3 years." After saying this, she closed her mouth again and stood quietly behind the young policeman. She was still the quiet and timid Zhou Qi. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, it would have been hard to imagine that the person in front of him and the sharp-tongued girl from before were the same person. "If that's the case, let's go to the police station." The senior policeman quite appreciated Gu Xingyin's attitude. He said to the others in the office, "If this matter was resolved privately by the school and escalated to the police station, the nature of the matter would be much more serious." Anticipating that more things would happen later, the young policeman asked Gu Xingyin to go back first and treat the wound on her forehead. When no one was paying attention, reporter Wang Lu walked out silently. At this moment, his heart was filled with anger. For the first time, when he wanted to break a piece of news, he didn't think about what this piece of news would bring him after it became popular. Instead, he hoped to expose some excessive phenomena to the public. He didn't even have lunch. He rushed straight home and started writing. And Gu Xingyin also returned to her small house. Before half of the afternoon had passed, a message from the police came from the shabby home phone at home. Those families asked to settle it privately with her. Today's update was delivered. A wave of advertising. Gao Lingji's new book, Transmigration Little Goblin. The two-faced male protagonist, Don't Come Over. It had been released. You could see it by searching Gao Lingji's pen name, Breaking Branches with Bare Hands, or directly searching the book title. Chapter 2151. The behavior of those families was completely within Gu Xingyin's expectations. To put it bluntly, even if Gu Xingyin called the police, they would not be dealt with too harshly in the end. After all, they were all minors. But for those parents, they would definitely be willing to spend some money to settle this matter privately. Otherwise, the criminal record left behind by the police when they were teenagers would become a strong obstacle to their careers in the future. If it were Zhou Qi herself, she would probably agree if the people who had bullied her were willing to apologize and even compensate a large sum of money. But Gu Xingyin had no intention of letting it go so easily. She did not even need to refuse. She just needed to wait patiently. She replied, saying that she did not want to see these people now, and then hung up the phone. Gu Xingyin did not go to school the next day. She lay at home and had a good sleep. Then, in the afternoon, she went to the internet cafe. Although she was a minor, no one in the internet cafe refused to let Gu Xingyin use the computer. They even provided her with a fake ID number. Gu Xingyin came here for only one purpose. She logged into a certain website. Then, as expected, she saw news about herself on a certain page. It was not only on this page. The reporter knew how to make use of the media. He posted what she wrote and the edited video she took on her Weibo. Hashtag how much damage can school violence cause to a child? Hashtag Gu Xingyin clicked on the video and watched it. The reporter was very moral. He had blurred out everyone's faces, but the dialogue between the characters was clear. The video was not short. It was about half an hour long. After she finished watching all the content, she found that there were thousands of comments and reposts under this Weibo post in half an hour. There were all kinds of comments below frowny face I'm tearing up. That little girl is so pitiful. Which school is this? I want to report the head teacher called Teacher Lu. She casually threw things at a student's face? Although the little girl's face is blurred out, the blood is still very clear, okay? Can the netizens find out which school this is? I will never send my child there again. F***ck, even a 30-year-old man like me is crying. What the F***ck, which stupid school is this? If I had a girl who was treated like this, I would tear those people apart. Nowadays, the education of some families is really worrying. Judging from the words and actions of those parents, the fact that the children are being taught like this is definitely related to their parents. Reporter Wang Lu, can you give me your contact information in private? I can adopt her. When I was in junior high school, I was also isolated, ostracized, and bullied by my class. Although I transferred schools later and everything changed for the better, I still feel sad when I think of those things. I feel sorry for this girl. I'm also one of the victims of school violence. I developed social phobia during puberty, and now that I've become a freelancer, it's inseparable from the opportunity back then. Even now, I still feel scared when I see strangers. I know which school this is. It's B City First High School. The teacher Lu in the video is the head teacher of grade 11 class 5. The difference in treatment of the students is obvious. The students who give her gifts from good families, such as the few who hit people in the video, are all her beloved soldiers. Chapter 2152. Upstairs, are you an insider? Don't go, please tell me more. Upstairs, insider, don't go +1. Number 1 middle school in B City? I just checked, a key high school in the country? Haha. Such a trashy teacher should be fired and banned from teaching for the rest of her life. She's simply a scourge to students. Gu Xingyin scrolled down and saw all kinds of comments. Of course, towards the end, this Weibo post became more of a channel for a former victim of school violence to vent. Usually, no one would notice, but when this post was posted, the replies below made countless passers-by sad and angry. And the school in the video was also completely exposed by the sharp-eyed netizens. Many netizens who claimed to be insiders revealed some insider information about this key high school in the country, as well as the outrageous teacher Lu. Perhaps Lu Hong's actions were too infuriating, but in less than an hour, her name, phone number, and even daily life photos were exposed. Gu Xingyin could imagine that Lu Hong would be very busy these few days looking at this degree of enthusiasm. By the time she logged out, this Weibo post had already been pushed to the top of the hot list. At this point, even if the school wanted to suppress it, it couldn't. When she returned home, the phone at home was ringing nonstop. She picked it up. Hello. On the other end of the phone was the homeroom teacher, Lu Hong. She spoke to Gu Xingyin in a gentle tone that she had never heard before. Zhou Qi, I thought about it over and over again last night, and felt that I had been negligent in the past. I thought that Zhang Qin and the others were all good students, and that it was just a simple misunderstanding with you. I didn't expect that you were really bullied. Gu Xingyin replied with a faint "oh." Teacher, you don't have to explain to me. Listen to me. The other party interrupted Gu Xingyin. She continued to speak to Gu Xingyin in a gentle tone. I know that you have been wronged in the past. So I contacted a few parents today and scolded them. I also told them that they must teach their children well. After the teacher negotiated with them, the 4 families agreed to give you 10,000 yuan each as compensation. In addition, teacher will also take out 5,000 yuan as compensation for you. Gu Xingyin did not respond. Lu Hong was a little anxious. Hello? Zhou Qi, why aren't you saying anything? I spent a lot of effort to get this for you. Gu Xingyin sneered in her heart and said, I don't want money. What do I need money for? I just want those who hurt and bullied me to be punished. On the other side of the phone, Lu Hong frowned. Actually, those families didn't come looking for her. She was scared when she saw the news about herself on Weibo. She called the police station and learned that the 4 families were willing to pay 50,000 yuan each to settle with Zhou Qi in private. She felt that this was a good opportunity, so she took over this matter without hesitation. However, in her mouth, the 50,000 yuan each became 10,000 yuan. In Lu Hong's heart, Zhou Qi was a poor child who had lost her parents since she was young. How could she have seen money? 40,000 was definitely a huge sum of money in her eyes. She couldn't possibly refuse. When the time came, she would settle the matter here and put down more than 100,000 yuan. Those families would definitely thank her later. Unfortunately, no matter how good she was, the other party simply didn't care about her. Chapter 2153. Lu Hong suddenly became anxious. She thought that Gu Xingyin didn't like the money and secretly blamed herself for deducting so much. She frowned and said, Zhou Qi, why don't you want to? These tens of thousands of yuan can make your life much better. Of course, if you think it's too little, I can talk to the parents of those students. There's no need. Gu Xingyin felt disgusted when she thought of this woman's hypocritical face. She said directly, I don't want any money. Teacher Lu, you don't have to waste your energy. I'll make it clear that I don't want money. I just want those who bullied me to get what they deserve. After she finished speaking, she hung up the phone with a bang. However, just as she hung up, the phone rang again. Gu Xingyin picked it up. It was from the police station. Zhou Qi, the guardians of the other parties said that they want to meet you in person to discuss the solution to this matter. On the other side of the phone was the young policeman who had been taking care of Gu Xingyin. He said this in a more tactful way. In fact, the parents' intentions were very obvious. They wanted to compensate and settle it privately. There was only one purpose, and that was to not implicate the children. In fact, at first, Zhang Qin's mother was not even willing to compensate, but later, when she saw that the public opinion on Weibo was too strong, she had no choice but to relent. The young policeman did not want Gu Xingyin to settle it privately. Even if he was just a bystander, he felt sorry for the girl. He felt that what those students did was really too much. Such behavior should not be forgiven. If Zhou Qi chose to settle it privately, then the bullying and humiliation she had suffered before would seem insignificant and could be bought with money. However, the young policeman knew more about Gu Xingyin's actual situation. After a deeper investigation of Zhou Qi, he finally understood what kind of life this girl had been living in the past few years. For other families, 200,000 yuan might only be the icing on the cake, but for Zhou Qi, it was enough to support her to live a carefree life until she went to university. Therefore, he didn't say anything and just waited quietly for Gu Xingyin to make her own choice. No matter what she chose, he planned to do his best to help this girl fight for the greatest benefits. Gu Xingyin didn't even have time to think. She answered directly, I don't want to see them, and I have no intention of settling it in private. Big brother, I don't want money, but I want the people who bullied me to get the punishment they deserve. I know that my situation has been exposed on the internet. Now many people are paying attention to this matter. What happened to me was definitely not an isolated case. Although I can't help much, at the very least, I want to let those students who bully others for fun know that it's not like there's no one who can control them. And it's not like they can trample on others without punishment just because they're underage. At this moment, the young policeman suddenly felt his eyes sting. He blinked hard and revealed a smile. I know what you mean, and I will also convey this to the other parties involved. You can rest at home for a few days. Don't worry, I will ask someone to find some connections and help you transfer to another school. After such a thing happened, no matter what, Zhou probably couldn't stay and be city number 1 middle school anymore. Chapter 2154. Gu Xingyin declined and said that there was no need. After thanking the young policeman, he hung up the phone in confusion. She had to change schools. However, this matter had already been brought up by someone else. The atmosphere in the Chun family was very solemn. In the spacious hall, the hale and hearty old Madame Chun and her dignified eldest son were all sitting upright on the chairs. Jiyu sat calmly on the chair. His siblings, who lived outside all year round and had their own families, also had solemn expressions. Old Madame Chun glanced at her son, daughter-in-law, and grandson. Finally, her gaze fell on her youngest grandson. A trace of gentleness flashed across her stern expression. So you all had the same dream last night? The dream that old Madame Chun was talking about was the reason why the whole family was finally able to sit together. It turned out that everyone in the Chun family had the same dream last night. That dream was very mysterious. The general idea was that the youngest son of the Chun family, Chun Shiza, was born weak with a congenital illness from his mother's womb. According to his physical condition, he would not live past the age of 25. However, there was a slight chance that he would meet his benefactor when he was 18 years old. And that benefactor, if only one person had such a dream, then it could be explained that it was a dream because he wanted Chun Shiza's body to get better. However, when the whole family had the same dream, it was very mysterious. Old Madame Chun was a firm believer in Buddhism. At first, when she woke up in the morning, she thought that it must be the guidance of Bodhisattva. Therefore, early in the morning, she called her son and daughter-in-law to come over. However, when she heard that the whole family had the same dream, old Madame Chun was even more certain of her thoughts. "We have to find this benefactor," she said solemnly. Chun Shiza was the lifeblood of the family. Everyone in the family hoped that he could live healthily until he was old. Even Father Chun, who had never believed in such supernatural things, didn't object after frowning for a moment. After all, he was his son. What if it really came true? Seeing that no one had any objections, old Madame Chun began to talk about how to find the person in the dream. At this time, Ji suddenly said, "Grandma, I know where she is." Whoosh! Everyone's eyes fell on him. Jiyu's expression did not change. "I also had a similar dream, but I know a little more than you." Old Madame Chun's face was filled with joy. "That's for the best. It seems that person is indeed our Shiza's benefactor." Jiyu smiled and thought to herself, "She's not only my benefactor, but also your future granddaughter-in-law." He stood up and said, "I'll pick her up myself." Old Madame Chun asked her eldest grandson to go with her, but Jiyu refused. He was going to bring his lover home. He didn't want anyone else to go with him. Thus, when Gu Xingyin woke up from her afternoon nap, she found that there was one more person beside her bed. Perhaps because she was too familiar with his aura, she actually didn't notice it. Jiyu smiled and looked at her. "Ain, I'm here to take you home." Gu Xingyin sat up from the bed in a daze. Before she could sort out her thoughts, she subconsciously replied, "Okay." She believed that this man, no matter what, would arrange everything properly. Jiyu sensed her inner thoughts and couldn't help but rub the top of her head. The corners of her lips curled up into a smile. Today's update. Because Gao Lingji's new book was released yesterday, it was updated at the same time like QQ Reading and Bookstore. However, Qidian and QQ browsers were channels, so the synchronization would be slower. Now the new book hasn't been synchronized yet. Baby, don't worry. You should be able to see it in a few days. I really am not a liar. Chapter 2155. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses. She shook her head and cleared the last trace of hazy pajamas in her mind. She looked at Jiyu with an inquiring gaze. Jiyu held her hand and sent some information into her mind. Gu Xingyin, who knew what he had done, couldn't help but laugh. She didn't expect that her lover would use such a method to solve her problem. Jiyu looked at her, smile and said, "There are many ways to make the Chun family accept you. But from the looks of it, there isn't any method that is faster and more effective than this." In this world, although most people didn't believe in gods and Buddhas, that unknown mysterious power was still the most revered. Especially the Chun family's most senior and most powerful person, the old madam, was an extremely devout Buddhist. It was also because of this that the progress of this matter was so smooth. Jiyu glanced at the small old room and pulled Gu Xingyin up. "Come back with me today." Gu Xingyin didn't refuse. She didn't even bring anything and followed Jiyu to the Chun family alone. Everyone in the Chun family was waiting at home. Jiyu insisted on going alone to find the girl. They had no choice but to let him go. Of course, there was another aspect. They also wanted to see if this dream was really as miraculous as it seemed. In this world, did the girl they saw in their dreams really exist? Then they saw their grandson, son and younger brother, who couldn't have any intense emotions because of his body, who had been indifferent to everyone since he was young, carefully holding a girl's hand and bringing her in with extreme gentleness. As a mother, Mother Chen knew her son the best. She could tell at a glance that her son cared about this strange girl. While she was surprised, a subtle jealousy rose in her heart. This stinky boy. He had never been so close to me. However, when Gu Xingyin raised his head, her previous emotions disappeared in an instant and were replaced by shock. It was actually real. This girl wearing a washed-out school uniform looked exactly the same as the noble person in the dream. The masters of the Chun family looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. "Grandma, I've brought Zhouqi back." Jiyu greeted. Zhouqi, the eldest daughter of the Chun family, Chen Shilu, who was sitting on the left, suddenly exclaimed in surprise. She suddenly stood up and walked over to Gu Xingyin in surprise. Looking at her carefully, Chen Shilu's gaze paused on the scar on her forehead. "Zhouqi, are you studying in No. 1 middle school?" she asked. Gu Xingyin nodded. She knew in her heart that Jiyu's sister in this life had probably seen the Weibo post about her. Sure enough, after hearing her affirmative answer, Chen Shilu's expression instantly became much gentler. She even smiled and said gently, "I'm Chen Shi's elder sister. You can also call me elder sister." Gu Xingyin and Jiyu were fine, but the rest of the Chen family looked at Chen Shilu in surprise. This powerful woman in the business world was usually not an easy character to get along with. Why did she suddenly become so easy to talk to in front of such a little girl? Jiyu answered this question on behalf of his sister. "Zhouqi has no relatives at home. I plan to let her live in the Chen family and go to school with me." Chapter 2156. This trip to the Chen's house was unexpectedly smooth. No one in the Chens objected to Jiyu's suggestion. Gu Xingyin followed Jiyu home in the afternoon. At night, there was an extra room for her in the Chen's house. She took the most comfortable bath since she came to this world. She opened the wardrobe and found that it was full of clothes in her size. There were even private clothes. She smiled. Sure enough, this kind of rich family was very efficient and watertight in everything they did. She casually chose an outfit and put it on. Someone knocked on the door. Gu Xingyin said, "Come in." And Jiyu walked in. He saw Gu Xingyin's forehead at first glance. Zhouqi's skin was very white. It was not the healthy kind of white, but more like a kind of sickly pale. Her eyebrows and eyes were very dark. Such a strong contrast often made people remember her at a glance. Speaking of which, Zhang Qin and others liked to bully her. In addition to the fact that no one in her family could help her, there was also a very important reason. That was the jealousy between girls. Zhouqi did not have beautiful and fashionable dresses like them, nor did she put on light makeup to enhance her appearance. Zhouqi did not even have the energy to pay attention to her own clothes. She did not even have the most basic necessities. So how could she have the time to study these things? However, even so, Zhouqi's natural face was much more beautiful than Zhang Qin and others. How could they be convinced? However, at this time, Jiyu was not paying attention to Gu Xingyin's appearance. He frowned and stared at the wound on her forehead. He could not help but reach out and touch it gently. "Does it hurt?" he asked. Gu Xingyin shook her head and said honestly, "I blocked the pain." Jiyu asked her to sit down and took out the medicine box from the cabinet. "Even so, you have to apply medicine." Gu Xingyin sat obediently and did not refute. She let Jiyu apply the medicine for her. and the two of them went downstairs together. Gu Xingyin sensed that the Chen family members were looking at her with much gentler and more intimate eyes than when she had just arrived in the afternoon. She knew the reason. For a family like the Chen family, no matter how much they believed in some mysterious power, if they wanted to adopt a stranger, they would definitely investigate the person's family background and character thoroughly. With the power of the Chen family, it was not difficult for them to investigate Zhou Qi's past in just one afternoon. Then, they naturally knew what kind of life Zhou Qi had been living all these years. Then at this moment, they should be feeling pity for him. He pitied an underage girl for having such an experience. Madame Chen looked at Gu Xingyin and smiled. She waved her hand and signaled for Gu Xingyin to come to her side. She took Gu Xingyin's hand and said, "It turns out that you are such a beautiful girl, but you are a little thin." Madame Chen also looked at Gu Xingyin gently and said, "It's okay. Take good care of her in our family in the future." In just one day, the matter of Gu Xingyin being adopted by the Chen family was settled. Although a family like the Chen family did not meet the conditions to adopt a child, there was nothing in the world that could not be solved by power. If there was, it only meant that one's power was not enough. At least with the power of the Chen family, it was not difficult to transfer Zhou Qi's household registration, adopt her, and make her completely cut off from her past. Chapter 2157. On the other side, Zhang Qin and several other families were extremely anxious. Now the public opinion on the internet was getting more and more intense. The resourceful netizens had even dug out the origins of their families. The Weibo post posted by reporter Wang Lu had been on the hot search list for many days, and the comments below had exceeded 100,000. When Zhang Qin's mother went to work today, she was even called to the office by the leader to ask if the person in the video was her. The leader's expression was very subtle at that time. Zhang Qin's mother had a bad feeling in her heart. Not only them, but number 1 middle school was also under a lot of pressure now. Many parents of students called the school and asked how the school should deal with the content in the online video. There were even parents who were more direct and directly said that they were worried about their children studying in such a school and wanted to find connections to transfer to another school. The principal of number 1 middle school was furious in the meeting room. Lu Hong was his niece. Because of this relationship, he usually took care of Lu Hong. The leaders in the school were also very polite to this young female teacher. The principal had heard some rumors about Lu Hong, but he had always felt that this kind of small matter was not a big deal, and that he could suppress it. However, he never expected that the other party would create such a big trouble for him. At this moment, not to mention the principal of number 1 middle school, even the director of City B's Education Bureau, could not suppress this matter without coming up with a result. He was ready to remove Lu Hong from her position in number 1 middle school. At this time, if he did not take any measures, the entire number 1 middle school would be dragged down. At that time, as the principal of number 1 middle school, how could he get away with it? However, before he could do anything, someone acted faster than him. The netizens thought that this was the end of it. Unexpectedly that night, another interview video was spread on the internet. It was exposed by reporter Wang Lu. After the previous video, many netizens followed the account of reporter Wang Lu, looking forward to more follow-up of this matter. Therefore, when Wang Lu exposed another video that night, many netizens clicked to watch it immediately. This time, the video was very long, almost an hour long. Usually, netizens would not be interested in watching such a long video. But this time was different. This video was made up of countless small interview videos. The producer was obviously very careful. Not only did he pixelate the faces of the interviewees, but he also blurred their voices. Only the uniform of number 1 middle school could prove their identity. In total, he interviewed more than 20 people. Each person was interviewed for 1 minute, and the longest was more than 3 minutes. The information revealed was shocking. I know. The video is real. Zhou Qi is in our class and has always been bullied by some people in the class. The rest of us don't even dare to get close to her, because we're afraid that we'll be isolated like that. Mr. Lu has accepted many gifts from Zhang Qin's family. Everyone in our class knows that. No one dares to offend Zhang Qin, not even the class monitor. I don't know their class well, but I heard from my classmates that Laoshi Lu is a relative of the principal. He has a powerful background. Zhou and I are in the same class. She's really pitiful. I met her a few times in the cafeteria. Every time, she would get a bowl of plain white rice and eat it with pickled vegetables or chili sauce. Sometimes she would just eat plain white steamed buns. I heard that she had no relatives at home. I wanted to give her some money, but Zhang Qin and the others hated her. I didn't dare to offend her. Chapter 2158. At the end of the video was the reporter Wang Lu's face. He said, "I've seen Zhou Qi with my own eyes and experienced the scene in the video. What I regret most at the moment is that when she was bullied, I was hesitant. I was afraid that I couldn't record the video after I was exposed. I became a qualified reporter, but I felt uneasy on my conscience. If she can see this video, I'll apologize to her. Those 2 police officers are good." After the video was exposed, there were still some voices of doubt on the internet, suspecting that it was a publicity stunt. But after this video came out, those people fell silent. In the video, the students of number 1 middle school used their own experiences to prove that these things were true. In the principal's office of number 1 middle school, the principal was most concerned about the trouble caused by Lu Hong in the past 2 days. Yesterday, he found Lu Hong and scolded her, saying that he couldn't protect her for doing such a stupid thing. He would hold a meeting at school as soon as possible and make a statement to expel her. However, after watching the newly released video, the principal had a bad feeling in his heart. Perhaps this was no longer a matter that could be solved by punishing Lu Hong. Soon he received a call from his cousin, who worked in the education bureau. On the phone, his cousin scolded him and then said angrily, "I can't take responsibility for this matter. It's up to you." The principal of number 1 middle school was a figure that everyone flattered in school. When had he ever been scolded like this? He scolded his cousin in his heart. He usually didn't hesitate to accept his gifts, but when something really happened, he was unreliable at all. But even though he was angry, he knew that he still had to rely on his cousin at this time. He suppressed the anger in his heart and continued to call, but this time, the other party obviously didn't intend to intervene and didn't answer his call at all. The principal of number 1 middle school was very angry. His connections here couldn't help, and on the other side, the key person in this matter, the student named Zhou Qi, couldn't be contacted either. Zhou Qi didn't come to school again after that incident. After the incident, the school contacted Zhou Qi, but she didn't answer the phone. The teacher went to her house to find her, but it was in vain. Thinking about it, it was strange. She was a girl with no parents and no relatives. Where could she hide? When he asked the police gave him an answer. The other party had been adopted and was living a good life. But which one are you asking? Sorry, this is a private matter. Damn it. With all kinds of troubles coming together, the principal of number 1 high school, who boasted that he had a good rest, could not help but curse and kick the table in front of him. In fact, he didn't know that it wasn't that his cousin didn't want to care about him, but that he couldn't. Not long ago, he received a call from his superiors. The people inside said very clearly that the school violence this time had caused quite a bad impact. Not only were the people very concerned, but even the leaders were quite angry. There were even higher-ups who directly pressured them, saying that such a phenomenon must be severely punished. The director of the Education Bureau was already thinking about how to deal with this matter to appease the angry leaders and the public. Who would care about a mere principal and form teacher? Today's update. After the honeymoon, there was one last plane left. Thank you for being with me all the way. Chapter 2159. It was also at this time that the parents of the students who had been acting high and mighty before completely panicked. It was as if in just one night, everyone knew what their child had done. Relatives, friends, and even neighbors were sizing them up intentionally or unintentionally when they went out. There was no good intention in those eyes. The most scared were Zhang Qin and the other students. Because of this incident, they didn't go to class for a few days. Perhaps this was a good thing for them because when Zhang Qin went out to buy snacks, there were people sizing her up and pointing at her behind, scaring Zhang Qin to death. The parents began to frequently contact the school and the police. They lowered their stance and only hoped that this incident would pass quickly. However, at this time, the school itself was already in a terrible state. They all knew that it was best to contact Gu Xingyin, the person involved. As long as Gu Xingyin publicly expressed that she accepted the apology of the school and the other families involved, then there was still room for negotiation. However, it was this key person who couldn't be found. Gu Xingyin was currently in the Chen family's house, talking to Mother Chen about transferring schools. What I mean is, you were delayed in first middle school, so I used an old friend's relationship to transfer you to Zhangya Middle School. After the summer vacation, you can re-enter the first year of high school. How about it? Zhangya Middle School was one of the best high schools in B City, and it was also Chen Shi's high school. Obviously, the Chen family was really thinking for her. Gu Xingyin naturally didn't have any objections to this kind of thing. Alright. After Mother Chen finished talking with Gu Xingyin, she talked about another matter. Your experience was exposed on the internet, and now it's causing a stir. The parents of the students who bullied you are looking for you everywhere. I want to ask your opinion. Mother Chen looked at Gu Xingyin inquisitively. She was also curious about what this girl would do. Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "If I don't forgive them, will Lu Hong be expelled? Will those students get the punishment they deserve?" Mother Chen nodded. "Of course." Gu Xingyin smiled, her big eyes filled with joy. "Then why should I forgive them?" Mother Chen was stunned for a moment and then said, "But they are now being cursed by thousands of people. They even have to be careful when they go out, lest they are recognized and beaten up by the netizens who are paying attention to this matter. Now that they knew they were wrong, they swore that they would change in the future. Don't you think they are very pitiful?" Gu Xingyin only said, "When I was beaten up by those people, locked in a dark room for an entire night, and tore up my homework for more than 2 hours, why didn't they pity me?" Mother Chen looked at the girl's thin but determined side profile, and suddenly revealed a smile. She reached out to stroke Gu Xingyin's hair and said softly, "I know. Don't worry, your Uncle Chen will help you settle this matter. It's impossible for those people to suppress it. Don't think too much. Take good care of your body and wait for the next semester to go to school with our Shiza." Chen Shiza was in his 3rd year next semester, and Gu Xingyin was in her 1st year. The two of them were in the same school, so it was just right for them to go to school together. Mother Chen walked downstairs, looked at her husband sitting on the sofa, and said, "This child has a good temperament. She has her own ideas." Chapter 2160. Her conversation with Zhou Qi just now was most likely a deliberate test. Mother Chen and her husband both felt that Zhou Qi had suffered too much before, and those who had hurt her deserved the punishment they deserved. However, they were also afraid that this child was too weak to be helped. That was why Mother Chen said those words. If Gu Xingyin chose to forgive them, then Mother Chen would also promise her not to pursue the matter with those families. But after that, they would only treat her as a child raised by their family for charity. When she became an adult, they would casually arrange for her to do something in their company or at home, and that would be considered as doing their best. People who were indecisive and didn't have a firm stance weren't worthy of their devotion. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin's answer didn't disappoint them. Father Chen nodded and said, "In that case, I won't hold back." The Chen family's intervention was the final driving force behind the final conclusion of this matter. This time, the punishment of the B City's Education Bureau caught the attention of the entire country. The principal of No. 1 Middle School was dismissed because of lax discipline. The dean related to this matter was dismissed. Another group of leaders of No. 1 Middle School were also affected because of this matter, but the punishment was less severe. The person directly involved, Lu Hong, was dismissed and stripped of her teaching license. This was only the punishment of the Education Bureau. The court also came out with the results. Compared to the Education Bureau, the court sentence was relatively light. After all, those students were underage and didn't cause any serious harm to Zhou Qi. As for those students, they were only detained for a few days and given some reform education. Each family also compensated the victim, Zhou Qi, for some physical and mental damages. After the results came out, The majority of netizens were very dissatisfied. However, there was no result to their dissatisfaction. Regarding school violence, this country currently didn't have a more complete system and regulations. After the results came out, perhaps some people could cover it up, but the popularity of this matter slowly died down. The people were always forgetful, especially when it had nothing to do with them. A few days ago, they were still filled with righteous indignation over something, but in the blink of an eye, they put it behind them and focused their attention and passion on other things. However, for Zhang Qin and the other families, this matter was far from over. Other than He Kai's family, who ran their own business, the parents of the other 3 families all received dismissal letters from their companies. The other party made it very clear that the impact of this incident was too bad. If they continued to stay in the company, it would not be good for the company's image. When it rains, it pours. After the parents lost their jobs, the first thing the newly appointed principal of No. 1 high school did was to expel Zhang Qin and the other 3 from school. This principal was a former vice principal of the school. He was very upright and plain-spoken, and had always been at odds with the principal. He had been suppressed by the principal all these years. Now that he had risen to the top, his actions were naturally bigger. All of a sudden, the entire No. 1 middle school became much more standardized. As for Zhang Qin and the others who had been expelled, no school was willing to accept them even if they wanted to transfer. At least in B City, no high school was willing to accept such students who had appeared in front of the entire nation. Left with no choice, they could only choose to go to another city. She couldn't possibly not go to school. At this moment, they hadn't thought about the future. 2 years later, no matter how outstanding their results were, those famous schools with hundreds of years of history wouldn't accept a student with a flawed character. How miserable could Ji, who had a terrible hand speed and had a memory deficit, be? The most important thing was that those 2 unscrupulous guys were laughing at me. I'll update 2 times first and post the rest before 12 o'clock. Chapter 2161. Gu Xingyin didn't lack the compensation money, but she didn't refuse it. This was what Zhou Qi deserved. At this point, the matter was considered to have come to an end. The Chens seemed to believe in their dream very much. In addition, Gu Xingyin's expression showed that she had a good temper and a good personality. Her experience was also very lovable. The Chens had a good impression of this girl. Mrs. Chen even asked the family's chef to make all kinds of nourishing soups for Gu Xingyin. Mrs. Chen was afraid that Gu Xingyin couldn't keep up with Zhang Ye's learning progress, so she specially hired a famous teacher to tutor Gu Xingyin at home. In fact, Gu Xingyin didn't need this at all. However, Zhou Qi's previous experience and achievements were obvious. If she acted like she knew everything, it would be really wrong. Therefore, the tutor, who was not very happy at first, but was unwilling to come because of the high remuneration offered by the Chen family, was shocked by Gu Xingyin in less than a day after meeting her. This child simply had an extremely intelligent brain. She could understand any kind of question with just a hint. He didn't understand why when she invited him over, Mrs. Chen said that this child's foundation wasn't good, and she might be slow to react. She also asked him to be more patient when teaching her. However, her foundation was indeed not very good. No, it wasn't that she didn't learn the foundation well. Looking at this girl's state, it was more like she had never been exposed to this kind of knowledge at all. He asked the question in his heart. Gu Xingyin told him the truth. In the past 2 semesters, she hadn't seriously attended a single class at all. This was because all her textbooks had been torn away, and she was sitting in the corner of the classroom. She was thin and small, so she couldn't see the teacher at the podium at all. When the tutor heard this, he lamented that such a good seedling was almost ruined by such an irresponsible teacher. From then on, he taught Gu Xingyin more attentively. Gu Xingyin naturally responded to his kindness with a beautiful answer. Mrs. Chen clicked her tongue in wonder when she heard the teacher's feedback. She said that she was supporting her family. Ji Yu sat at the side and said with a smile. She was originally a very outstanding girl. It was her previous school that held her back. Mrs. Chen looked at her youngest son who was smiling gently. She felt that his attitude was a little strange. However, she didn't think too much about it and only suppressed this thought. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. During this period of time, Gu Xingyin had finally put on some weight under the careful care of the Chen family's chef. She had also become much fairer and taller. Her previously long black hair had also been meticulously combed into a neat short hairstyle. Her delicate facial features were highlighted, and she looked full of youthful energy, natural and unrestrained. This is what a 16-year-old girl should be like. If it were the former students of No. 1 middle school, they would never believe that this was the same Zhou Qi who always avoided people. The Chen family's attitude towards Gu Xingyin had also become more and more cordial. As for the reason, more than 3 months had passed since this girl came to the Chen family. Chen Xi's illness didn't act up even once, and he looked more and more energetic. When they went to the hospital for a checkup, the result was that Chen Xi's current condition was very good. If he could maintain this condition for a long time, his illness might not have a big impact on his lifespan. Chapter 2162. The entire Chen family, except for Jiyu, looked at Gu Xingyin as if they were looking at a savior. Sure enough, it was the Bodhisattva who made Shiza meet his destined benefactor. Every time Gu Xingyin and Jiyu talked about this, they felt it was funny. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. After the college entrance examination, Gu Xingyin became the top scorer of the college entrance examination in B City with absolutely excellent results. The Chen family was very happy. 3 years ago, their Shiza was the top scorer of the college entrance examination in B City. They didn't expect that 2 years later, their Chen family had another top scorer. You said Zhou Qi was an outsider? The Chen family didn't admit it. In these 3 years, the Chen family had really regarded Gu Xingyin as a real family member. The Chen family's teacher appreciation banquet was held in a very high-end hotel in B City. At the banquet, Gu Xingyin became the absolute protagonist. Even the class teacher, who had always been strict, had a smile on her face. Gu Xingyin drank a few more glasses and felt a little dizzy. She got up and went to the bathroom to tidy herself up. When she went out, she saw a person. The young girl had gorgeous makeup on her face. Her hair was permed into a golden color. She was wearing a deep V-neck black close-fitting dress and a pair of pointy stilettos that were at least 10 centimeters high. She was full of the smell of the wind. She and Gu Xingyin looked at each other. Obviously, they didn't recognize her and walked past her casually. Gu Xingyin stood quietly and watched from afar as she walked to a middle-aged man with a big belly and held his hand intimately. Gu Xingyin saw very clearly that the middle-aged man with an oily face, who was old enough to be her father, pinched her perky buttocks unceremoniously. The girl just smiled coquettishly and didn't have any other reaction. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and sneered softly. Back then, Zhang Qin's family was a middle-class family with a good social status. She actually fell to this point. Things were unpredictable. However, those people and those matters had nothing to do with her now. She splashed some cold water on her face to wake herself up and walked out again. At the entrance of the hotel, Zhang Qin seemed a little absent-minded. She thought of the girl she had seen in the washroom. The girl didn't look old. Her skin was fair, her facial features were delicate, and her eyes were bright and spirited. She had a youthful aura that was well protected by her family. However, she felt that the other party looked a little familiar. But when he thought about the people he knew, if he had really seen someone with such an outstanding appearance, how could he forget? She frowned and pondered. Suddenly, an impatient shout came from the front. The man who had just gone to drive the car was calling her. Zhang Qin hurriedly responded. She grabbed her bag tightly with one hand and suppressed the disgust in her heart. She quickly walked up with a sweet smile. The moment she walked out of the hotel, she subconsciously turned back to look. On the huge LED screen at the entrance of the hotel, a line of glaring red words stung her eyes. Congratulations to Zhou Qi for becoming the top scorer of the college entrance examination in B City. Zhou Qi? Zhou Qi. Zhang Qin only felt a flash of inspiration in her mind. The face she saw in the washroom just now instantly connected with the face in the depths of her memory. Although it looked like a big change, as long as one looked carefully, one could still see that her facial features hadn't changed much. She looked at the electronic screen in a daze. The man's impatient shout rang in her ears again. Suddenly, she burst into tears. Today's update. Gao Lingji had always felt that living 10,000 times better than the enemy was the greatest revenge against her. Yes, everyone still has recommendation votes. Vote for Gao Lingji's new book. The old book is almost finished, so there's no need to boost its popularity. The new book needs more care. Moi. Chapter 2163. Back home. Gu Xingyin drank a little too much, so she went back to her room to rest after informing her family. Jiyu didn't leave. He looked at his parents, who seemed to be in a good mood, and took the initiative to start a topic. Dad, Mom, I have something to tell you. The Chen couple looked at each other and nodded. Jiyu went straight to the point. I like Zhou Qi. I will be with her and marry her in the future. He didn't mean that he wanted to be with her, but that he would. He had even thought about their future. The Chen family's parents didn't show much surprise, as if this was something they had expected. In fact, it was obvious that since Zhou Qi came, their youngest son, who had always been indifferent and otherworldly, suddenly became a little more lively, and even smiled more often. Especially during the holidays, the two of them were almost always together. If they couldn't tell, how could they have the nerve to call themselves parents? Everyone in the Chen family was quite satisfied with Zhou Qi. She was sensible, beautiful, and had a good reputation when it came to dealing with people. Of course, more importantly, she was really their youngest son's benefactor. Over the years, Jiyu went to the hospital regularly for checkups, and the results were getting better and better. The specialist who had been in charge of Chen Shi's health since he was a child said bluntly that it was a miracle. According to Chen Shi's current physical condition, although there was no way to cure his congenital disease, it could be controlled so that he wouldn't have an attack for the rest of his life. This alone was enough for all the Chen family members to treat Gu Xingyin differently. Mrs. Chen said directly, as elders, we won't interfere in the affairs of you young people. Dad and Mom only have one request. First of all, Chi-Chi must be willing to be with you. Second, if you really are with her, you have to treat her well. Needless to say, Jiyu could only dote on his lover. In fact, he came today just to inform the parents of this body. If they didn't agree, Jiyu had countless ways to make them agree. Jiyu waited for Gu Xingyin for 4 years. At Gu Xingyin's graduation party, Jiyu proposed to Gu Xingyin, who was speaking on the podium as an outstanding graduate, in front of all the teachers and students. This kind of thing was not rare, but every time it happened, it was so beautiful that it made people yearn for it. I love you. Are you willing to spend the rest of your life with me? Gu Xingyin smiled at the man in front of her and reached out her hand. I am willing. At the same time, her voice sounded in Jiyu's mind. I'm willing to walk with you until the end of time. Jiyu also smiled and reached out to hug the person beside her. Silly, to us time is endless. We will truly be together forever. The two of them lived a loving life in this world. When the two aged bodies could no longer hold on, and were about to die, Jiyu suddenly grabbed Gu Xingyin's hand. Ain, in the next world, follow me. I want to give you a gift. Gu Xingyin was a little confused, but she didn't ask anything. She just smiled and said, okay. The two old people on the bed held hands and stopped breathing. At the same time, 2 rays of light that ordinary people couldn't see flew out from the two bodies and disappeared into the void. Chapter 2164. This time the two of them did not separate. They did not possess anyone. After Gu Xingyin opened her eyes, she saw the man in green holding her hand. This is one of my incarnations, Jiyu said. His original body still could not come here. Gu Xingyin looked up at his side. Everywhere was gray. There was nothing in sight. There were no living creatures, no plants, no sound, not even mountains or rivers. This is... A thought flashed through Gu Xingyin's mind. Jiyu looked at her sideways. Ain, this is your world. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes wide. As soon as Jiyu finished speaking, the gray mist in front of her suddenly separated. The sky, the earth, and the ground suddenly separated. Gu Xingyin looked at the scene in front of her in shock. Although she had seen it in Jiyu's memory, it was not as shocking as seeing it with her own eyes. She witnessed the birth of a world. Come. Jiyu held her hand. The two of them walked in the void as if it was flat ground. What do you want? Jiyu suddenly asked. Gu Xingyin looked at him in confusion. Jiyu stretched out his hand and gently pointed at the sky with his fingertip. The sun. A huge golden fireball was born in the sky. The whole world was lit up. Gu Xingyin immediately understood what he meant. She asked excitedly, Can I do it too? Jiyu smiled. Try it. Gu Xingyin stretched out her hand and gently pointed at the sun. The moon. A cold radiance spread out, and a bright silver moon appeared beside the sun. The sun and moon were high in the sky, shining brilliantly on the sky and the earth. Gu Xingyin looked at this scene in amazement. She could not help but say, The stars. Following her words, countless tiny light spots appeared in the sky. She was as happy as a child. She slowly looked at the world and said one word after another. White clouds, rivers, mountains. In the end, she spoke faster and faster until she finally closed her eyes. She didn't speak again, but the surrounding environment changed even faster than before. All the appearances and creatures that should exist in a normal world slowly appeared around him. Gu Xingyin's expression became more and more solemn. Jiyu looked at her with a smile. It seemed that she had finally understood the essence of creation. The sun rose and the moon set, and the stars moved. Gu Xingyin sat with her eyes closed, and Jiyu stood by her side, watching over her. After an unknown period of time, Gu Xingyin opened his eyes. At this point, the entire world had changed in her eyes. She could hear the sound of flowing water thousands of miles away. She could understand what the wind whispered in her ears. If she wanted to, she could easily know the thoughts of any living creature in this world. In this world, she was the god who controlled everything. How do you feel? Gu Xingyin moved and stood beside Jiyu. I feel very good. This world is like my child. Jiyu looked at her gently and said, So I made the right choice in giving you this gift. Its name is Saint Origin World. If I love you, I will give you the whole world. This was the world that Jiyu gave to Gu Xingyin. This was the love that Jiyu gave to Gu Xingyin. And that you're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.